My name is Emma, and I am 28 years old. I am sitting in my car right now in the parking lot of a fancy Italian restaurant holding a gift I spent 3 months making for my father. Today is his 60th birthday, and I have been hoping this would be the day we finally reconnect. But in just a few hours, I will be humiliated in front of 50 people. My own father will call me his biggest disappointment, and then a complete stranger will change everything. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If stories about family healing and unexpected second chances speak to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now, have you ever walked into a room full of hope only to have someone you love tear you apart? Stay with me. To understand why that night broke me the way it did, I need to take you back to the beginning. My father Richard just turned 60 years old. He is a successful businessman who owns 3 high-end furniture stores across Connecticut. From the outside, he looks like a man who has it all. A thriving business, a beautiful home in the suburbs of Hartford, respect from everyone in the community. But inside our family, things have always been more complicated. My mother passed away from cancer when I was 14 years old. Her name was Catherine, and she was the warmest person I have ever known. She had this way of making everyone feel seen, feel loved, feel like they mattered. She was the one who first put a paintbrush in my hand when I was 5. She would sit with me for hours, watching me draw, telling me that I had a gift. She believed in me when no one else did. When she died, it felt like the sun went out in our house. My father changed almost overnight. He became cold distant, obsessed with work. I think losing her broke something inside him that never healed. But instead of leaning on his children, he pulled away. He buried himself in his business and expected us to figure out life on our own. My older brother Marcus is 32 now. He is a lawyer at a prestigious firm in Hartford, married to a woman named Diane, who comes from old money. Marcus was always the golden child. He got straight A's, went to law school, followed the path my father approved of. Everything Marcus did was right. Everything I did was wrong. I chose art. I went to college for fine arts and became an illustrator for children's books. I have worked on over 15 published books now. I pay my rent. I buy my own groceries. I live independently in a small apartment in New Haven. But to my father, none of that matters. To him, I am a dreamer who wasted her potential. A disappointment. I remember the day I graduated from college. I was 22, so proud of my degree, so excited to start my career. I called my father to remind him about the ceremony. He was supposed to come. He promised he would. He never showed up. When I called him afterward crying, asking where he was, he said something I will never forget. He said, "That degree is worthless in the real world, Emma. I had better things to do than watch you celebrate a mistake." I cried myself to sleep that night, and something inside me shifted. I stopped expecting anything from him. I stopped calling as often. I stopped trying so hard to earn his approval. For 6 years, I built my life without him. I created illustrations that ended up in bookstores across the country. I found joy in my work, in the quiet moments at my drawing table, in the letters from children who loved my pictures. But deep down, buried beneath all the independence I had built, there was still a little girl who wanted her father to be proud of her. That is why I decided to go to his 60th birthday party. A few weeks before the event, my brother Marcus called me. He said something that gave me hope. He said, "Dad has been mentioning you lately. I think he misses you. Maybe his birthday could be a fresh start." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that after all these years, my father might finally see me for who I really am. So I spent 3 months making him a gift. It was a handmade photo album filled with pictures from our family history. Photos of my mother, of Marcus and me as children, of holidays and birthdays and ordinary days that meant everything. I designed each page myself, added handwritten notes, poured my heart into every single detail. I thought maybe, just Maybe this gift would show him that I still loved him, that I still wanted us to be a family. The night of the party, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before going inside. I was wearing a navy blue dress I had saved up for. I had done my hair nicely put on makeup, tried to look like someone he could be proud to introduce. In my hands was the album wrapped in craft paper with a red ribbon. I took a deep breath and told myself this was going to be different. I was wrong. The restaurant was called Villa Toscana, an upscale Italian place on the outskirts of Hartford. My father had rented out the entire private dining room for the occasion. When I walked in, I was immediately struck by how elegant everything looked. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Fresh flowers sat on every table. A large banner read, "Happy 60th Birthday, Richard," in gold letters. There were about 50 guests already mingling, holding glasses of wine, laughing and chatting. I recognized some of them. Business partners, wealthy friends, distant relatives I had not seen in years. Everyone looked polished and successful, the kind of people my father surrounded himself with. I clutched my gift a little tighter and scanned the room for a familiar face. Marcus spotted me first. He walked over with Diane by his side, both of them dressed impeccably. Marcus wore a tailored gray suit, and Diane had on a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Emma, you made it," Marcus said, giving me a quick hug that felt more formal than warm. "Of course I made it," I replied, trying to smile. "It is Dad's 60th birthday." Diane nodded at me without really looking at me. "Nice dress," she said in a tone that made it clear she did not mean it. I noticed Marcus kept glancing over his shoulder toward our father, who was standing across the room surrounded by a group of men in expensive suits. There was something tense in Marcus's expression, something he was not telling me. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Yeah, everything is fine," he said quickly. "Dad is just, being Dad. Go say hi to him. He will be glad you came." I was not so sure about that, but I walked toward my father anyway. Richard was in the middle of telling some story to his business partners, gesturing with a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked healthy, confident, completely in control. When I approached, he paused mid-sentence and turned to look at me. "You made it," he said flatly. No hug, no smile, no warmth. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, holding out the wrapped gift. "I made this for you. I hope you like it." He glanced at the package without taking it. "Put it on the gift table. I will open everything later." That was it. No curiosity, no thank you. He turned back to his friends and continued his conversation as if I was not even there. I stood frozen for a moment, feeling foolish with the gift still in my hands. Then I quietly walked to the gift table and placed the album among the other presents. Bottles of expensive wine watches, golf accessories. My handmade album looked out of place among all those fancy things. The seating arrangements had already been made, and I discovered I was not at the main table with my father Marcus and the important guests. Instead, I was placed at a smaller table near the back of the room with distant relatives I barely knew. But there was one person at my table who I was genuinely happy to see. My Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister. She was 65 now, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. She was the only person in my family who truly understood me. When I sat down beside her, she immediately took my hand. "Emma, sweetheart," she said softly. "How are you holding up?" "I am fine," I lied. She looked at me with those knowing eyes. "You do not have to pretend with me." I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Really, Aunt Margaret, I am okay." She squeezed my hand and leaned closer. "Your mother would be so proud of you. You know that, right? She would be absolutely bursting with pride." My eyes stung, but I blinked back the tears. I could not cry here. Not now. Not in front of all these people. Throughout dinner, I watched from my corner of the room. I watched my father laugh with his friends toast, with his business partners pose for photos with Marcus and Diane. I watched him move through the crowd like a king among his subjects, and not once did he look in my direction. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was used to this. But it still hurt. After all these years, it still hurt. After the main course was cleared, someone clinked a glass and called for attention. The room gradually fell silent as my father stood up at the head of the main table. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice strong and commanding. 60 years is a long time. And as I look around this room, I see so many people who have been part of my journey. Business partners who trusted my vision. Friends who stood by me through the ups and downs. Family who carries on my legacy. He paused, taking a sip of his scotch, letting the moment breathe. Building a business from nothing is not easy. When I started my first furniture store 35 years ago, I had nothing but a dream and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. Today, I own 3 stores, employ over 100 people, and have built something that will last long after I am gone. The crowd applauded. My father smiled, soaking in the admiration. Then he turned his attention to Marcus. "I want to take a moment to talk about my son, Marcus. From the day he was born, I knew he was special. He excelled at everything he touched. Valedictorian of his high school class, top of his class at law school, now a rising star at one of the best firms in Connecticut. Marcus is everything a father could hope for. He embodies every value I hold dear. Hard work, discipline, success. He is without a doubt the greatest achievement of my life." Marcus smiled modestly as Diane rubbed his arm. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. I sat at my table in the back, trying to keep my expression neutral. I was happy for Marcus. I truly was. But I could not help noticing that my father's eyes had not even glanced in my direction. Then came the words I never expected. "And then," my father said, his tone shifting, "there is Emma." My heart stopped. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father's expression had changed. The warmth was gone. In its place was something cold, almost contemptuous. "Emma is my daughter," he continued. "But I have to be honest with all of you here tonight. She is the biggest disappointment of my 60 years on this earth." A gasp rippled through the room. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it must be a joke. But my father was not smiling. "She had every opportunity I could give her. Good schools, a stable home, a father who tried to guide her toward success. And what did she do? She chose to draw pictures. Children's book illustrations, she calls it. As if that is a career. As if that is something to be proud of." I could not move. I could not breathe. "She is 28 years old," he went on. "No husband, no children. She lives in a tiny apartment in New Haven, barely scraping by. Meanwhile, her brother has built a real life, a real career, a real future." He shook his head, as if he was genuinely saddened by having to say these things. "I have tried, believe me. I have tried to help her see reason. But Emma is just like her mother. Head in the clouds, dreaming about things that do not matter. Completely disconnected from reality. Bringing my mother into this felt like a knife to the chest. My mother who had loved me unconditionally. My mother who had believed in my dreams. So I want to say this publicly so there is no confusion. My father concluded, I gave up on Emma a long time ago. And tonight on my 60th birthday, I am done pretending otherwise. He raised his glass. To family, the ones who make us proud. The room was silent. No one moved. No one knew what to do. I looked at Marcus. He was staring down at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. Diane had her hand over her mouth, but she did not say a word. My Aunt Margaret started to stand up, her face flushed with anger, but her husband pulled her back down. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. I could not stop them. Slowly, I reached for my purse. I pushed back my chair. I stood up. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. I walked out of that dining room with 50 pairs of eyes watching me. I heard whispers starting behind me, but I did not turn around. No one followed me. I made it to my car before I completely fell apart. Sitting in the driver's seat, I sobbed so hard I could barely breathe. My whole body shook. The tears just kept coming, wave after wave of pain and humiliation and grief. How could he do that? How could he say those things in front of everyone? In front of his friends, his business partners, people I would probably never see again. But who would forever remember me as Richard's disappointing daughter? I thought about my mother. God, I missed her so much. She would never have let this happen. She would have stood up, grabbed my hand, and walked out with me. She would have told my father exactly what she thought of his cruelty. She would have held me and told me I was loved, I was worthy, I was enough. But she was not here. She had been gone for 14 years. And without her, I had no one. I looked at my phone. No messages from my father. No messages from Marcus. Not even a text asking if I was okay. The only notification was from Aunt Margaret. I am so sorry, Emma. I love you. Please call me when you can. I could not face going home. My apartment would feel too empty, too quiet. I would just sit there, replaying my father's words over and over again until I drove myself crazy. So I started the car and drove. I did not have a destination in mind. I just needed to move to get away from that restaurant, from that night, from everything. After about 20 minutes, I found myself on a quiet street I did not recognize. There was a small cafe on the corner, with warm light glowing from the windows. A hand-painted sign read, "The Night Owl Cafe." I pulled into the parking lot. My eyes were still red, my makeup was ruined, and I probably looked like a mess. But I did not care anymore. I just needed a place to sit, to breathe, to exist for a little while without falling apart. The cafe was nearly empty. Soft jazz played from somewhere in the background. I ordered a cup of chamomile tea and found a table in the far corner, away from the window, away from everything. I sat there staring at my cup, watching the steam rise. My hands were still trembling. I pulled out my phone again. Still nothing from my family. Just the silence that confirmed what I already knew. They were not coming for me. They never were. The door to the cafe opened and I heard footsteps. I did not look up. I was too lost in my own pain to notice anyone else. A woman ordered coffee at the counter, her voice gentle and warm. I heard her thanking the barista, heard her footsteps moving across the floor. She sat at the table next to mine. I still did not look up, but after a few minutes I heard her voice soft and kind. "Excuse me, honey. Are you okay?" I meant to say I was fine. That was what you were supposed to say, right? I am fine. Do not worry about me. I can handle this. But when I opened my mouth, no words came out. Instead, I started crying again. The woman did not look away. She did not seem uncomfortable or embarrassed. She simply reached into her purse, pulled out a small packet of tissues, and slid them across to me. "Take your time," she said. "Whatever it is, you do not have to carry it alone." I did not know this woman. I had never seen her before in my life. But something about her presence felt safe, like a warm blanket on a cold night. After a few minutes, I managed to stop crying long enough to really look at her for the first time. She was in her mid-60s with short silver hair cut in a stylish bob. She wore round tortoiseshell glasses and a cream-colored cardigan that looked soft and well-loved. There were laugh lines around her eyes, the kind that come from a lifetime of smiling. But there was also something deeper there, a wisdom, an understanding. "I am Gloria," she said. "Gloria Patterson." "Emma," I managed to whisper. "Nice to meet you, Emma." She smiled gently. "Now, you do not have to tell me anything if you do not want to. But sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger. We have no history, no expectations. Just two people sharing a moment." I do not know why, but I started talking. I told her about the party, about my father standing up in front of 50 guests and calling me his biggest disappointment, about the photo album I had spent 3 months making still sitting unopened on the gift table, about my brother who did not defend me, about my mother who died when I was 14, about all the years of trying and failing to earn my father's approval. Gloria listened without interrupting. She did not try to fix anything or offer advice. She just listened, really listened with her full attention. When I finally finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I will never forget. "Your father's words say everything about him and nothing about you." I looked at her, not quite understanding. People who hurt others like that, she continued, are usually drowning in their own pain. They lash out because they do not know how to heal. It does not excuse what he did, but it explains it. And more importantly, it means his opinion of you is not the truth. It is just his wound projected onto you. I had never thought about it that way before. But he is my father, I said. His opinion is supposed to matter. It matters because you want it to, she replied. And that is understandable. Every child wants their parents to be proud of them. But some parents are not capable of giving that gift. And when you realize that you have a choice, you can spend your whole life chasing something you will never catch. Or you can start building your own sense of worth independent of anyone else's approval. She paused, looking at me with those kind eyes. "What do you do, Emma? What is your work?" "I am an illustrator," I said quietly. "I draw pictures for children's books." Her face lit up. "Really, that is wonderful. I write children's books myself." I blinked. "You do?" "For over 30 years now. I have published more than 30 books. My name is Gloria Patterson. Maybe you have seen my work." The name suddenly clicked. Gloria Patterson was a legend in the children's book world. Her stories were in libraries and schools across the country. I had grown up reading her books. "I know your work," I said, stunned. "Your books were some of my favorites when I was a child." She smiled warmly. "Well, what a small world this is." Gloria ordered us both refills coffee for her and more tea for me. The cafe was quiet, the jazz music soft in the background. Outside, the night had grown darker, but inside this little corner, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. A sense of possibility. "Tell me about your journey," I said. "How did you become a writer?" Gloria leaned back in her chair, a faraway look in her eyes. "I was a lot like you, actually. My father was a wealthy businessman. He wanted me to go into finance to take over his company someday. But I loved stories. I loved creating worlds with words. He thought it was a waste of time." "What happened?" "When I was 26, I told him I was going to be a writer. He was furious. He said I was throwing away my future. He said no daughter of his would embarrass him by pursuing such a foolish dream." She paused, her expression soft but serious. "He stopped speaking to me after that. For 15 years, we did not exchange a single word. I missed his wedding anniversary. He missed my wedding. He never met my daughter until she was 12 years old. It was painful. Some days, I questioned everything. I wondered if I should just give up and do what he wanted. But you did not. No, because deep down I knew that if I abandoned my dream to please him, I would lose myself completely. And what would be left then? A hollow person living someone else's life." I felt tears pricking my eyes again, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of recognition. I saw myself in her story. "One night," Gloria continued, "when I was about your age, I was sitting alone in a bar feeling completely lost. A stranger sat down next to me. We started talking. Turned out he was an editor at a small publishing house looking for new voices." "You are kidding." "I am not. He read my first manuscript and decided to publish it. That book became a bestseller. It changed my entire life." She smiled at me, and I realized what she was doing. She was showing me that miracles happen, that strangers can change your life when you least expect it, that the darkest nights sometimes lead to the brightest dawns. "What happened with your father?" I asked. He came around eventually. When I became successful, when my name was in newspapers and my books were in stores, he started softening. He never apologized, not really, but in his own way, he tried to reconnect. By then, though, I had realized something important. What was that? That I did not need his approval anymore. I had built my own life, my own success, my own sense of worth. His opinion stopped mattering so much because I had learned to believe in myself. I sat with that for a moment. The idea of not needing my father's approval felt foreign, almost impossible. But sitting here with Gloria, I caught a glimpse of what that freedom might feel like. "May I see your work?" Gloria asked suddenly. "Do you have any examples on your phone?" I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and opened my portfolio. I showed her some of my recent illustrations, characters I had created, worlds I had built with watercolors and ink. Gloria studied each image carefully, zooming in on details, taking her time. "Emma," she said finally, "these are beautiful. You have a gift, a real, genuine gift." I felt my cheeks flush. "Thank you. That means more than you know coming from you." "I mean it. Your style is unique. There is a warmth to your work, a tenderness. Children would connect with this. Adults would connect with this." She set down the phone and looked at me intently. "Can I tell you something? The universe works in mysterious ways. Maybe we were meant to meet tonight?" I did not understand what Gloria meant until she continued. "I have been working on a new book," she said. "It is the most personal project I have ever undertaken. It is about a little girl who loses her mother and has to find her way back to joy. I have been searching for the right illustrator for 6 months. I have looked at dozens of portfolios, met with countless artists. None of them felt right." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "And then tonight, I could not sleep. I felt restless, like something was pulling me out of the house. So I drove around until I found this little cafe. And here you are." My heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I would like you to consider illustrating my book. I think your style would be perfect for this story. I think you would understand it in a way that other artists might not." I could not believe what I was hearing. Gloria Patterson, one of the most respected names in children's literature, wanted me to illustrate her book. Are you serious? Completely serious. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "This is my contact information, and this is the contact for my editor at the publishing house. I want you to reach out to them. I will put in a good word." I stared at the card in my hand. It felt surreal, like I was dreaming. "Why?" I whispered. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Gloria said gently. "I know that you are talented. I know that you are hurting. I know that you have been made to feel like your dreams do not matter. But they do matter, Emma. Your work matters. You matter." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us cannot see our value. But that does not mean the value is not there. It just means we have to find others who can see it. And tonight I see you. I see your talent, your heart, your potential. And I do not want you to give up. I felt tears streaming down my face again, but these were different tears. Tears of gratitude, tears of hope. "I do not know what to say," I managed. "Say yes." Gloria smiled. "Say you will think about it. Say you will call my editor next week. Say you will keep drawing, keep creating, keep believing in yourself, even when the world makes it hard." I nodded, clutching the business card like a lifeline. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes to all of it." We talked for another hour after that. Gloria told me about her daughter Sarah, who had passed away in a car accident 10 years ago. She told me that writing books for children was her way of keeping Sarah's spirit alive, of giving other children the joy that Sarah would have wanted them to have. I told her about my mother, how she used to sit with me while I drew, how she always said I was destined for great things, how I still missed her every single day. By the time we left the cafe, it was almost midnight. The parking lot was empty except for our 2 cars. Gloria hugged me before we parted. It was a real hug, warm and firm and full of meaning. "This is not the end of your story, Emma," she said. "This is just the beginning." I watched her drive away, then sat in my car for a few minutes, looking up at the night sky. For the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten: hope. The days after the party were strange and quiet. I did not call my father, and he did not call me. Part of me kept waiting for an apology, a text, something. But my phone stayed silent. Marcus called once 3 days after the party. His voice was awkward, uncomfortable. "Emma, I just wanted to check in. That night was, intense." "Intense," I repeated. "Dad humiliated me in front of 50 people, Marcus. He called me his biggest disappointment. And you sat there and said nothing." There was a long pause. "I know. I should have said something. But you know how Dad is. When he gets like that, there is no reasoning with him. I did not want to make it worse." "Make it worse? How could it have been worse?" Another pause. Then quietly he said, "He did not mean all of that, Emma. He was drinking. He gets dramatic when he drinks." "He meant every word," I said. "And deep down you know it." Marcus sighed. "Look, I am sorry you are hurting, but I cannot fix your relationship with Dad. You two have to work that out yourselves." We hung up shortly after. Marcus had always been good at staying neutral, at keeping himself safe. I could not blame him entirely, but I also could not pretend it did not hurt. Aunt Margaret called every day that week. She was furious at my father, ready to confront him herself. I told her not to bother. It would not change anything. Richard was who he was. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Margaret said during one of our calls. "She always knew you were special. She told me once when you were just a little girl that you had a light inside you, a light that nothing could extinguish." I held on to those words like a treasure. A week after the party, I gathered my courage and called the number on Gloria's card. I spoke with her editor, a warm woman named Susan, who had been expecting my call. She asked me to send my portfolio, which I did that same day. 2 days later, Susan called back. They wanted me to illustrate Gloria's new book. I cried when I got off the phone, but for the first time in a long time, they were happy tears. Over the next 8 months, I poured myself into the project. Gloria and I met regularly sometimes at that same little cafe where we first met. She shared her vision for the book, and I brought it to life with my illustrations. It was the most meaningful work I had ever done. The book was called The Garden in Her Heart. It was about a little girl named Lily, who plants a magical garden after her mother passes away. Through tending the garden, she learns that love never really dies. It just transforms. Every illustration I drew was infused with memories of my own mother, the way she used to smile, the colors she loved, the warmth of her presence. It was healing for me in ways I cannot fully describe. When the book was published, it received glowing reviews. Critics praised the illustrations as much as the story. Schools and libraries across the country ordered copies. Parents wrote letters saying how much the book helped their children process grief. I started receiving offers from other publishers, other authors. My career transformed seemingly overnight. But it was not really overnight. It was years of hard work, years of believing in myself, even when my father did not. The success was just the world finally catching up. About a year after the birthday party, I received a call from Marcus. Our father had suffered a mild stroke. I went to the hospital. Not because I had forgiven him, not because I expected anything to change, but because I needed to close this chapter for myself. I needed to face him one last time, not as the little girl desperate for his approval, but as the woman I had become. He was sitting up in the hospital bed when I walked in. He looked older, smaller somehow. The commanding presence was diminished. "Emma," he said. "You came." I came. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he looked at me with something I had never seen before in his eyes. Not quite apology, but maybe uncertainty. "You are still doing your drawing?" he asked. "Yes, Dad, I am still drawing. I just illustrated a book that became a bestseller. I have 3 more projects lined up with major publishers. I am doing exactly what I love, and I am good at it." He processed that, nodding slowly. "I do not understand your world," he finally said. "I never have." "I know." Another silence. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of The Garden in Her Heart. I placed it on the table beside his bed. "This is who I am," I said. "I do not need you to understand anymore, and I do not need your approval. I spent my whole life trying to earn something you were never going to give, but I am done now. I am proud of myself, and that is enough." I stood up, ready to leave. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it, "your mother always believed in you." I paused at the door. "I know she did, and I wish you had too." Then I walked out. It was not a movie moment. He did not call after me. He did not suddenly transform into the father I always wanted. But something in me shifted. I felt lighter, freer, like I had finally set down a weight I had been carrying for 28 years. That night, I had dinner with Gloria. We sat at our usual table at the Night Owl Cafe, sharing pasta and laughing about nothing in particular. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." She raised her glass. "To freedom." "To freedom?" I agreed. A year has passed since then. My father and I still do not have much of a relationship. We exchange brief pleasantries at holidays, nothing more. Marcus and I are cordial but distant. The family I was born into may never be what I wished it could be. But I have built a new family. Gloria has become like a mother to me. We work together. We share meals together. We support each other through the hard days. I have made friends in the illustration community, people who celebrate my work and lift me up. And I have myself. For the first time in my life, I truly have myself. That night at my father's birthday party, he tried to break me with his words. He tried to make me feel worthless, invisible, small. But the universe had other plans. It sent me a stranger in a quiet cafe who saw my value when I could not see it myself. I learned something important through all of this. The people who are supposed to love us do not always know how. Sometimes they are too wounded, too broken, too lost in their own pain to give us what we need. And when that happens, we have a choice. We can spend our lives waiting for something that may never come. Or we can start building our own sense of worth brick by brick, day by day, until we become our own source of light. I am not angry at my father anymore. Anger takes too much energy, and I have better things to do with mine. I feel something closer to compassion now, mixed with sadness. He missed out on knowing me. He missed out on a daughter who would have loved him fiercely if only he had let her in. But that is his loss, not mine. So if you are watching this, and you have someone in your life who makes you feel small, who tells you that your dreams do not matter, who calls you a disappointment, I want you to know something. Their words are not the truth. Their limitations are not your limitations. And their inability to see your light does not mean the light is not there. You are enough. You have always been enough. And no one's opinion, not even your father's, can ever change that truth. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone doubt you or tear you down only to find strength you did not know you had? Have you ever met a stranger who changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. We are all in this together, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It helps more people find these stories and maybe find the hope they need. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories about resilience, healing, and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that they are enough just as they are. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it stays with you the way Gloria's words have stayed with me. May you always find the courage to believe in yourself, even when others cannot. May you always find the light even on the darkest nights. And may you always remember that the most important approval you will ever need is your own. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.